Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I'm going to give you guys 5 things that I hate about my Honda NT650. If you guys missed the last video I did with my Hawk, make sure to check it out after watching this video where I gave you guys 5 things I love about this bike. And with all of that being said, let's get right into the video.
The very first thing I want to talk about in this motorcycle, if you've never rode one before, it's a little hard to understand what this bike really rides like. But the very first thing that I hate about the NT650 really isn't apparent with my bike whatsoever. These motorcycles from the factory, one of the big reasons why people modify them is because they are extremely restricted from the factory. These motorcycles were detuned and stuffed down like crazy. I've had the opportunity in the past to ride a bike that was stock and it just felt dead. The bike did not feel as engaging and enthusiastic as this bike is right here. This bike revs up fast, it has a nice power band, but it is true, the stock bike is sluggish, it's slow, and for the people who test rode them from new or stock application, these bikes probably weren't too appealing. The bikes did have a very numbing sensation to them, which is unfortunate that they got that kind of conception. I'm sure fuel economy and regulations were a big part of it, but once you open these bikes up, it kind of goes away. But it's something to mention that it is something I don't like about the bikes, and I'm sure a lot of people don't like it as well, that these bikes were extremely just stuffed down. Now luckily my bike has been opened up and I don't have to deal with the stock motorcycle, but if you are planning to get one of these or you have one, I highly recommend you check out some bigger jet kits for these bikes and get aftermarket air intakes to open this bike up to what it should have been from the factory. Pair that with a nice exhaust. This motorcycle is an absolute pleasure after those couple things are done. Now, moving on to the next thing that I quote-unquote hate about the bike slash just dislike and I wish would be different is the fuel capacity. Now this is a motorcycle. Motorcycles do have smaller fuel capacities. They get great fuel economy, but I've struggled to get more than 100 miles to the tank on this bike, and when you are having a little bit of fun with it, it's really more like 80 miles to a tank. I'm not running on reserve just yet. I've probably been a little bit easier on the bike with this tank, but it is guaranteed that I will run out sooner than later. I've put a couple of tanks through it, and with those tanks I've been having fun opening it up and really getting in the rev range, enjoying the bike like they should be enjoyed. And it's not about fuel economy, it's just about tank size.
As far as fuel economy actually goes, the bike actually does pretty good. It gets about 40-50 miles to the gallon even with the unrestricted setup.
But I believe this bike has around a 2 or 2.5 gallon tank. It's really small, and when you're having fun with the bike, obviously when you take it easy, and I'm sure if I hyper-miled it just a little bit, I could see a little bit more than 100 miles on a single tank. But when I was driving it, having fun when I first bought it, it'd be 75 miles and I'd be on reserve, or 80 miles and I'd be on reserve, getting about 40 miles, 45 miles to a gallon. It just runs out really quick when you're having fun. You go on a back road and you put some miles on a day, it's just like boom, you're out of gas. It's not the biggest complaint in the world. The next complaint I have for this bike is something that Honda usually doesn't get knocked down for, but it's the quality, and mainly the quality of the certain plastics and the front end and things like that. Now plastics get old, and this bike has a rear cowling that is made of old plastic, and almost every single bike is going to have some sort of hairline fracture, full crack, or something like that in the motorcycle. It happens with age, but if you do look at the plastics, they are insanely thin. It's like the lightest bump that you give them, they have a very high possibility of cracking through, and it's something that I wish Honda did a little bit better at. It's not just this bike alone. Honda with this bike, and in fact, the bike that reminds me very much of this bike is the GB500, which I also own. Those bikes also have very, very skinny plastic in the rear cowling that cracks very easily, and it's a big problem because Honda doesn't make parts for that bike, and Honda doesn't make new parts. They don't make new cowls that you can buy for this bike or for the GB500. Something you kind of have to look for when you buy the bike, but I just guarantee you any bike you're going to look at, unless it's a pristine example of one, is going to have some sort of hairline fracture running through the motorcycle. Now that's another great point to make, but also front forks. Now front forks are going to see rocks, they're going to see chips, the dents, scratches, whatever it is. But I've noticed on this bike, and going back to the GB500, the two bikes are very, very similar to me, and they have the same front end fork kind of pitting that happens to them. They also have the same paint on the engines, and the paint on the engine picks up these odd chips. Both the bikes pit and corrode and kind of look odd in the same way from each other. The paint on both the bikes kind of aged the same, and it looks the same, probably was the same material when they came out. Same with the front end. Whenever a bug hits it, it tends to leave a little bit of pitting behind, and it looks really bad. And I do want to try to address it, try to buff it out, try to repaint it, whatever it is, and get the bike looking nice again, because I know you can, but it's just a weird thing that Honda did at the time. But now, thing number 4 that I hate about the bike kind of goes both ways. This is a very, very small bike. This is a 650 V-twin water-cooled engine, and the bike is very narrow. Now, I love that about the bike, but also at the same time, I hate it about the bike. I love it because you can throw the bike around, have a bunch of fun with it, and it's extremely fun for the first little bit you ride on it. But after you're on it for 30, 40, 50 minutes, it becomes a little aching. This bike has had its clip-ons lowered underneath the triple tree here. Usually they sit right on top and actually rise up a little bit, which changes the positioning quite a bit. But with this bike, you're supporting your weight up quite a bit because the tank is super skinny, that you're not really resting your legs or pinching the tank. So the fourth thing really is, after some time, especially if you're someone who's a little bit taller and a little bit bigger, the size of the bike, it gets a little tiring. This would be like the perfect daily motorcycle, the perfect motorcycle for someone to have fun on weekends and stuff with. And the last and final thing about this motorcycle that I hate is how unappreciated this bike is. Because for the price point that these bikes are currently in, for everything that it is, this bike is fantastic. I did not expect to love this bike as much as I do, and it be as great as it is. Even my friends who have let ride this bike all agree that this is a fantastic motorcycle, and it even went as far as, after I let one of my friends ride this bike, he went out and he bought one for himself. Because the NT650 is such a good bike. They're so unappreciated at this moment, and I think that these bikes in the future will only garnish and get more love in the future. For basically every single person who's ever rode them, for any person who's ever appreciated them, for any person who's actually gone out and been on an NT650 or owned one, they have nothing but good things to say. These bikes deserve way more love than they get, and every time I see a forum post or someone saying that they've owned one, it's always, this is a fantastic bike. Lightweight, fun, and in just every single way possible, an enthusiast experience. With all of that being said, that's all I have for this video. If you did enjoy, leave me a like, subscribe to the channel, and as always, I will see you guys in the next video.